In this episode, we take a deeper look at control objectives for information and related technologies, COBIT, because this is one of those frameworks that people mention often in governance and security conversations without always slowing down enough to explain what it actually does. For a brand new learner, the name can sound technical and distant, as if it belongs only to auditors, executives, or large organizations with layers of committees and formal reporting. The better way to approach it is to see it as a structured way of thinking about how an organization should govern and manage information and technology so that it supports business goals, controls risk, and creates value over time. That matters in security because weak protection is often not caused only by missing tools. It is caused by unclear priorities, confused accountability, poor decision-making, and disconnected efforts across the organization. COBIT helps bring order to those problems by giving leaders and practitioners a common model for how governance and management should work together. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At its core, COBIT is not just a security checklist, and it is not only an information technology operations guide. It is a broader governance and management framework that helps organizations think about information and technology as enterprise resources that must be directed carefully rather than left to grow in an unplanned way. That makes it especially useful in environments where technology decisions affect business performance, compliance, resilience, trust, and risk exposure all at once. Many organizations reach a point where they realize that different teams are making important decisions without a common language or shared structure. One group may focus on efficiency, another on uptime, another on compliance, and another on security. But if nobody is connecting those priorities at the enterprise level, the result can become fragmented and inconsistent. COBIT exists to reduce that fragmentation. It gives the organization a way to connect leadership intent, operational management, performance monitoring, and improvement into one more coherent system. One of the most important ideas inside COBIT is the difference between governance and management, because understanding that difference makes the whole framework much easier to follow. Governance is concerned with evaluating stakeholder needs, setting direction, making priorities clear, and monitoring whether the organization is moving where it intended to go. Management, by contrast, is more concerned with planning, building, running, and monitoring activities so that the direction set by governance becomes real in day-to-day operations. Beginners often blend those together, but the distinction matters a great deal. A board or executive group may determine that the organization needs stronger digital resilience, better control over third-party risk, or clearer accountability for sensitive information. That is governance thinking. The work of turning those priorities into policies, processes, ownership models, monitoring practices, training efforts, and technical activities is management. COBIT helps organizations keep those two layers connected without confusing one for the other, and that connection is essential in effective security governance. Another major strength of COBIT is that it treats information and technology as part of enterprise value creation rather than as an isolated support function. That may sound like executive language, but the idea is actually practical. Organizations use information and technology to serve customers, run operations, deliver products, manage financial processes, support employees, and make strategic decisions. Because of that, weak governance in these areas can damage the whole business, not just the technology department. COBIT helps leaders think about how technology should support enterprise goals while still keeping risk, compliance, resilience, and control in view. This matters for security students because it teaches an important mindset. Security is not strongest when it behaves like a separate kingdom with its own private logic. Security is strongest when it is embedded in the way the organization governs information and technology overall. COBIT encourages that broader perspective, which is one reason it remains so useful in governance-focused discussions. A deeper look at the framework also shows that COBIT is designed to be holistic rather than narrow. Instead of assuming that governance succeeds because a few procedures exist, it recognizes that real governance depends on several connected elements. Processes matter, but so do organizational structures, policies, information flows, culture, behavior, skills, and the underlying services and applications that support the enterprise. That is important because security and governance problems are rarely caused by one missing document alone. An organization may have strong policy language and still fail because nobody owns the process, employees are not trained, reporting is weak, or the culture rewards shortcuts over disciplined practice. COBIT helps prevent that kind of partial thinking by forcing attention onto the whole governance system. It reminds leaders that a control environment cannot be understood only by looking at one layer. Governance becomes effective when multiple parts of the organization reinforce one another in a consistent and purposeful way. The structure of COBIT also helps explain why it feels so practical once you understand the model. It organizes governance and management into 40 objectives spread across 5 domains. One domain focuses on governance at the top, while the other domains focus on planning and organizing, building and implementing, delivering and supporting, and monitoring and assessing. For a beginner, the exact labels matter less at first than the pattern they create. The framework is showing that good governance is not only about setting direction. It is also about planning intelligently, building carefully, delivering reliably, and reviewing performance honestly. That full cycle matters because organizations often concentrate too heavily on one area while neglecting another. They may invest in planning but fail in execution, or they may deliver services without strong review and oversight. COBIT helps keep attention distributed across the life cycle of governance and management instead of letting one attractive area dominate the whole conversation. One of the most valuable concepts in COBIT is tailoring, because the framework does not assume every organization should look the same. This is a major advantage and also one of the reasons mature practitioners respect it. A hospital, a government agency, a global bank, a fast-growing software company, and a mid-sized manufacturer do not face the same combination of risk, regulatory pressure, customer expectations, operational dependence, and strategic priorities. COBIT recognizes that by encouraging the governance system to be designed according to the organization's context rather than copied blindly from a generic template, factors such as enterprise strategy, risk profile, compliance demands, threat landscape, technology adoption style, and role of information in the business should influence how the governance system is shaped. That makes the framework more realistic. It also teaches beginners a very important lesson that carries well beyond COBIT itself. Strong governance is not about imitation. It is about designing a system that fits the organization you actually have. Closely related to tailoring is the idea that enterprise goals should drive information and technology goals rather than the other way around. This is often described as a cascade of alignment, and it is one of the most useful thinking tools in the framework. The organization begins with what it is trying to achieve overall, then works downward into the information and technology outcomes needed to support those larger aims, and then into the governance and management objectives that make those outcomes possible. That sequence helps prevent a very common failure in security and technology leadership. Teams often become preoccupied with controls, tools, or projects before they have clearly connected those efforts to enterprise purpose. COBIT pushes back against that habit. It encourages leaders to ask what business result matters, what information and technology conditions are necessary to support it, and which governance or management actions deserve priority because of that connection. This makes security and technology work more defensible, more relevant, and easier to explain to leadership. Performance management is another part of COBIT that deserves close attention because governance is weak if nobody can tell whether it is working. The framework encourages organizations to think about goals, practices, activities, and metrics in a structured way so that performance can be observed rather than guessed at. This matters because many organizations talk about improvement without having a disciplined way to recognize whether improvement is really happening. They may know that a problem feels smaller or that reports look cleaner, but they do not always have enough evidence to judge capability, consistency, or control strength over time. COBIT supports more mature thinking by tying objectives to practices and by encouraging evaluation of how well those practices are being carried out. For security management, that is extremely helpful. Leaders need to know not only whether a control exists, but whether the process behind it is repeatable, whether ownership is clear, whether measurement supports decision-making, and whether the organization is actually becoming more reliable as a result. Although COBIT is broader than information security alone, it has direct value for security governance because security problems often reveal failures in enterprise governance and management rather than failures in technology alone. An organization may suffer repeated incidents not because it lacks a security tool, but because nobody defined ownership clearly, risk acceptance was informal, third-party oversight was weak, leadership reporting lacked clarity, or important control decisions were made without business alignment. COBIT helps expose those weaknesses by placing security inside a larger governance system. It encourages leaders to think about policies, structures, culture, accountability, information flows, monitoring, and strategic alignment, all of which affect security outcomes. This is especially important for people on the CISM path because the exam and the role both care deeply about governance, risk, program development, and incident management. COBIT supports that management-level view by helping security be understood not as isolated defense activity, but as part of enterprise decision-making and oversight. In a real organization, using COBIT well does not usually mean rolling out every part of the framework all at once in a dramatic program. More often, it means using the framework to sharpen decisions, clarify structures, and improve the way governance is designed over time. A company may use it to define committee responsibilities more clearly, tighten the link between business goals and security priorities, improve third-party risk oversight, or identify which governance and management objectives deserve immediate attention. Another organization may use it to bring more consistency to reporting and performance review so leadership can see risk and control effectiveness more clearly. What matters is that the framework becomes part of how the organization thinks and acts, not just part of how it writes documents. Beginners sometimes imagine frameworks as giant projects that must be adopted in perfect form to have value. COBIT does not need to be treated that way. It can provide value whenever it helps an organization become more intentional, more aligned, and more accountable in its governance practices. There are also several misconceptions about COBIT that are worth clearing away because they can discourage learners before they really understand what the framework offers. One common mistake is assuming it is only for auditors. Auditors certainly use it, but the framework is equally relevant to executives, governance professionals, risk leaders, security managers, information technology leaders, and others who need a structured view of enterprise governance and management. Another mistake is assuming it is only for massive organizations with endless bureaucracy. Larger enterprises may use it extensively, but the thinking behind it can still help smaller organizations make clearer decisions about ownership, alignment, and oversight. A third mistake is believing that COBIT is just a pile of controls. In reality, it is much broader. It is about how governance and management work together, how enterprise goals are translated into structured action, and how the whole system can be evaluated and improved. Once beginners understand that, the framework becomes much less intimidating. A simple example can make all of this easier to picture. Imagine a growing online services company that depends heavily on customer trust, cloud-based operations, rapid software change, and third-party providers. The leadership team knows security matters, but decisions are scattered. Development teams move quickly, vendor reviews happen inconsistently, risk decisions are informal, and reports to executives focus more on technical events than business impact. COBIT would help this organization ask better questions. Who is accountable for governing information and technology risks at the enterprise level? Which objectives matter most given the company's strategy and exposure? How should planning, delivery, oversight, and monitoring connect to business priorities? What structures, policies, and reporting practices are needed so leadership can evaluate whether the right direction has been set and whether management is carrying it out well? In that scenario, COBIT is not simply a book on a shelf. It becomes a way to turn a fast-moving but fragmented environment into one with clearer governance and stronger security leadership. For a student, one of the most valuable outcomes of learning COBIT is that it changes the kinds of questions you ask. Instead of seeing every problem as a technical gap, you begin asking whether governance is clear, whether management practices support enterprise goals, whether the right owners are involved, whether performance is being monitored meaningfully, and whether the governance system reflects the organization's actual context. Those questions are powerful because they move you beyond reactive thinking. They help you see that security maturity often depends less on one brilliant tool choice and more on whether the organization has a coherent way to direct, manage, review, and improve information and technology over time. That perspective is one of the reasons COBIT remains so useful in governance education. It teaches that real control comes from structured decision-making, not from isolated effort that lacks enterprise alignment and accountability. When you step back and look at the full picture, COBIT becomes much more than an abstract governance framework with a complicated name. It becomes a practical way of thinking about how an organization should evaluate stakeholder needs, set direction, organize management activity, align information and technology with enterprise goals, and monitor whether the system is producing value with acceptable risk. Its deeper strength is that it treats governance as a design system rather than an accident, and it recognizes that processes, structures, culture, information, people, and services all influence whether that system will succeed. For someone studying security management, that is a very important lesson. Strong security does not emerge only from technical effort. It emerges from clear governance, disciplined management, and thoughtful alignment across the organization. That is what COBIT helps make visible, and that is why it remains such an important framework to understand in any serious discussion of governance and security leadership.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.